The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Friday, July the 31st, 2026. We're live here at CHD TV. So tomorrow is August, which means many Americans are getting ready to get their children back to school. We have an amazing toolkit made by our marketing department here at Children's Health Defense with help from all departments, science, legal, you name it. So it's CHD Back to School, and those will be the link to that will be in the show notes. So do press on that and send it to any parent that may need to know their rights more than anything else. So in a moment, we're going to have Theresa Wrangham on from NVIC, and we're going to be talking about vaccines and knowing your rights. And then we're going to have Noam Inkfeather on, and we're going to be talking about a book that he's written that I think you're going to find fascinating. Liz Enko Lacks Vax Facts. So we're going to have a chat about that. And then we're going to go to Brian Hooker, and he has got Ben Tapper on talking about Censored, Deplatformed, and Unbroken. So it's a great show today, everybody. It's Friday, and I hope you're all feeling good. And we're going to get on with our first guest straight away. It's the amazing Theresa Wrangham. Good morning, Theresa.
Good morning, Polly.
It's so
nice to see you.
It's good to see you. And just for viewers, so you know, Theresa and I go back a long way at conferences and goodness knows what, trying to figure out all kinds of things way back in the day.
Yes, that's true.
But today we want to talk about back to school and knowing your rights. And I think the first thing is, how do people, wherever they are in this country, how do they even begin to figure out what their rights are? Because we all know the school is going to tell them something different. You've got to get all these vaccines. You cannot come to school. So where do we start?
Well, I think you start by taking the time to get yourself informed. Don't get pressured in that school environment. The biggest mistake parents make, in my opinion, is thinking that the CDC schedule or a schedule published by, for example, the American Academy of Pediatrics, that those are actually requirements, and they simply are not. They are recommendations. And it's really important to realize that many states don't require that long list of vaccines. So do your homework. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Your state legislature is where those decisions are made. That's why vaccine requirements differ from state to state. And that's why we have different exemptions from state to state. So there's nothing better than to arm yourself with information before you have to start filling out those forms, in my opinion.
And if we go to the national vaccine, your company, NVIC, do you have help there as well for us if we're completely confused?
Yes, actually, it's what we're known for. We have a map on our site. You can click on your state on our state pages under law and policy on our website and click through to see exactly what are the vaccine requirements for K through 12. What are they for private colleges and universities? You know, in states, some states allow their universities and colleges to set their own vaccine policy. And we get questions from children and parents who have adult children, you know, what's the scoop on college? So again, go out to the college site if it's a private university that has their own policy, get it in writing. Don't take somebody's word for it. Get it in writing, what the policy is for your school. If you send your child to a private school, and they're not federally funded, you may not enjoy some of the legal protections that are offered through federal law that I hope we'll go over here in a little bit. But write them and find out what your rights are. What is your right to examine curriculum around vaccine lesson plans? What is your right to opt out of school vaccine clinics that may be on the campus to administer vaccines for that day?
Yeah, can you talk about the federal recommendations when you're filling out the enrollment forms?
The federal, you mean the vaccine
Yeah,
schedule?
yeah.
Yeah, so again, those are recommendations, and they very often show up on school enrollment forms. Some states have been required through their legislatures to note which ones are actually required and which are not. You could always come to our site to find out. You can also go to your local state health department where they generally list what is exactly required, and sometimes they link out to statute. So don't be fooled because they reproduce the schedule, the recommended schedule by the CDC or the recommended schedule of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Those are recommendations. They are not requirements. So make sure you understand what is actually required in your state, because often it is less than what is showing up on the schedule.
Theresa, what about the teachers in the school that start to try and preach to the children about vaccine-related issues? Because that's a problem.
It is. We saw this come up in COVID, and so we did a bit of research. There are laws that are actually older than the 1986 Act that protect some of your rights. There is the Pupil Privacy Rights Act that was passed in 1974, and it prevents schools from asking your children questions about their religious beliefs, about other personal information, political beliefs, religious beliefs, just personal beliefs. And vaccines came up in that. They're not allowed to do that. You're supposed to, as a parent, get notice of when these surveys come up in your school. But more than that, you're allowed to inspect curriculum. And I don't think a lot of parents realize that. And I think you have to be proactive, because I don't think parents are being told. Ask your school what is going to be covered, whether it's about vaccines or another topic. You have a right to inspect the curriculum, and you have a right to opt out. And we saw that recently in a Supreme Court ruling. I believe it was Mahmoud, which talked about kids opting out of certain curriculum. So that applies to any lesson plan around vaccine-related topics. The ones I have seen online that are pre-prepared for teachers to download and teach in their classroom are very one-sided. They don't talk about the vaccine injured. They don't talk about the risks associated with vaccination. And I'm sorry, vaccinations are a medical procedure, and they do carry risks, and some of those risks are greater for some than others, and people get injured. So it's important that there's balanced information, or that at least you can opt out if you disagree with what's being taught.
Yeah, and then there's the other. I mean, I remember my niece. Let's frame this up. My niece, it was Gardasil day at school, and my niece, my sister said, absolutely not. My niece going to get this shot? And she was made to sit on her own in a tiny room while the other children took their Gardasil shot and then sat and had pizza. And the next day, those kids came to school, some of them, not all of them, saying, "My mum says you're going to die of cervical cancer." And that kind of bullying for a child is immense. So is it about educating your children as well?
Absolutely. In fact, there's another law, the Family Educational Rights Act. You have to provide to your school certain vaccine information, and that information that you provide is protected. It can't be disclosed. But when we set a student off like that, or a parent talks outside of that protection, there's no privacy. There's no way to protect your child. But tell your child, hey, if you ever get bullied into showing up for a vaccine clinic after I've said no, you call your mom, you call your dad, you insist upon it, you don't walk in there. You don't talk to your friends about your vaccination status. And I would have a real problem with a school that isolated a child like that, because that essentially is disclosing some sort of vaccination status. I would perhaps consider consulting an attorney about how that disclosed to fellow classmates that somehow they were held out. It was very obvious that your niece didn't go to the HPV event, and that disclosed to all students that she wasn't vaccinated, or at least gave that perception. What's wrong with that? Well, you don't know that she didn't already get it at a doctor's office, and now she's being subjected to bullying. So it's a real problem. We do have to teach our children to stand up for themselves, and to say, no, I'm not taking your word for it. I want you to call my parents immediately. I'm not walking into that school clinic. It's important that you ask. Don't assume that your school is going to inform you of your rights. Parents must stop being afraid to ask questions. They must simply be very pointed and say, what are the plans? What are the lesson plans? Are you going to have a school vaccine clinic show up? In private schools, particularly, Polly, this is a problem, because the laws that I just mentioned don't apply to a private school setting. So you must look at handbooks, you must review them, you must ask those questions. I will say the one law that supersedes everything, though, the 1986 Act, the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, there is a portion in there, and this is what protects to some degree on minor consent to vaccination, because as you know, some states have passed laws that allow minors to consent to vaccines and their parents don't know about it. The act has a provision in there, and it's strictly for parents and guardians. It is not for emancipated, or it's not for children who, in the eyes of state law, are able to give consent. It is defined as parents and guardians. Parents and guardians must receive a current vaccine information statement that's put out by the CDC for any vaccine that's covered by the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. Parents have to receive this information prior to vaccination, meaning if there's a vaccine clinic showing up on campus, they cannot administer a vaccine to any child without a parent getting that information first. And that doesn't matter if you're in a private school setting. It doesn't matter if you're employed actually as an employee. The vaccine provider, the person administering that vaccine, must give that to the parent or guardian or the adult receiving the vaccine. And that is the broadest protection. It's going to signal to parents, if you get one of those showing up at home, you should be asking a lot of questions about why you're receiving it.
Yeah, we had another story where a school nurse, or I don't know, health clinic nurse, sat a child down, young child, and said, "Your parents are not doctors. We are doctors. Doctors are very clever, blah, 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 medical degree." And this child ended up getting vaccinated because they persuaded her to, and it was her right, apparently, to be able to choose. I can't remember which state this was in. I feel like it was California. I don't know. But again, I feel like schools can be unsafe places if you feel this way about
Yeah.
vaccines.
I would agree with you. And we've heard those stories, and actually they're documented on government websites. At least under where there have been emergency use authorization, there have been vaccines inappropriately given to children after parents had actually said no, opt out, and kids were given it. You have to wonder if they were bullied. But bullying is real. You've seen it within your own family. We have to raise strong children. We have to let them know that we are their lifeline, and to insist upon, no, I'm talking to mom and dad. They know me better than anyone. You're not my mom. You're not my dad. It's unfortunate. We should be able to have trust, and the sad fact of the matter is we are going to have to raise some very strong individual children. We're going to have to let our children know that we are their lifeline, not that nurse administrator, that the last word is with mom or dad, and to never be afraid to insist upon that we're the adult at charge, and it doesn't matter if we're there or not. Get that lifeline.
Yeah, and also be super careful about your children going on field trips, school trips, whatever you call these day out little camps or whatever. We had someone recently telling us that their child was given Tylenol, and she specifically did not want her child to have Tylenol at any cost.
Oh,
And then, if your child hurts themselves and they have to go to hospital, then what's the situation there with them being given a tetanus? So it's you sign forms, do you not, when your children go on these trips? You have to really be careful what you're signing.
Yes, that's a good point, and I hadn't thought about it. But in signing my own children's permission slips for field trips, there very often, as I recall, is a clause around medical needed care. It raises a really good question. What is going to be seen as medically appropriate? They should be calling you. I react to tetanus shots, so that would be a concern to me for my children. Did they inherit any of that? So, and that's probably one of the most common things that are given in an emergency room, from some sort of accident on a field trip. But there are other laws like that Pupil Privacy Rights Act that actually for school clinics and so on, that's the one that allows you to inspect curriculum, but it also says no bodily injections, no invasive physical examinations on school campus without advance notice to the parent. I don't know how that would apply to a field trip situation when you're actually in an emergency room, but one would hope they'd be calling the parent immediately if your child was in the emergency room to ask. And to advise you of what the situation is. You have to be vigilant is really the bottom line here.
So people are preparing, Theresa. What's in summary, because we're running out of time, in summary, how do people prepare for their child going back to school? What would your practical steps be?
Oh, get information before you look at any of those forms. Know exactly what requirements are. Find out what your exemption options are. Ask, especially if you're in private school, but ask about lesson plans that are going to be taught if you have concerns about what's being taught about vaccines in the classroom. Uh, read all your forms, understand that you shouldn't be talking to school personnel prior to signing any of these forms about your child's status. So, come to our site and click on your state, find out what the requirements are. You can also go to our frequently asked questions to learn more about your rights in the classroom for school health clinics, where they apply and where they do not. And I would also just encourage, get involved. The vaccine landscape changes very quickly. Go to nvicadvocacy.org to find out what vaccine-related legislation is active in your state. We make it easy to understand the piece of legislation, talking points, and how to contact your legislator with your concerns. So ask questions, get informed, make informed decisions, and teach your child to rely upon you. Don't not tell your child anything. You have to tell your child, always call mommy. If there's a medical procedure going on, you call me first. You don't say yes to anything.
Right. Or homeschool. I'm just saying.
Well, homeschool laws, though, are changing too, Polly. Unfortunately, some homeschools, like in Colorado, are still subject to some of these vaccine laws. So again, the bolts are being tightened, and the only way to untighten those bolts is for we as Americans to get involved and understand what are the laws in our state. This is a state battle. This isn't a federal battle. Vaccine mandates are always going to come from a state level. So know what your state requires and get involved. If you don't like vaccine mandates, fight them. Fight them. That is the best advice I could give you. We need to protect our freedom in this country.
And Theresa, you've been fighting for a long time and still are, and we're so grateful for all the work you have done and still do, and the work of NVIC. Thank you so much for being on this morning.
Well, we're grateful to stand alongside many organizations now. It's a fight we all need to take up. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Theresa. All right, everyone, we're going to go now and find out about a book that's been written. We're going to go to Noam Inkfeather. Good morning, Noam. How are you?
Morning. How you doing?
It's good to see you out in nature.
Yeah, it's beautiful out here.
All right, let's put up the cover of this book so everyone can see it. Liz Enko lacks vax facts. Who did you write this book for?
Well, of course, I want everyone to read it, but really, the book is for families. It's kind of dressed up like a kid's book, but it's a pretty serious work. But my idea for how people might enjoy this work is, in this age where everyone's on screens and parents are constantly battling screen time, I think there is kind of a movement for people to, find activities to do that are not screen related. So my hope is that families might enjoy this book together, pour a cocktail, make a hot cocoa, a glass of raw milk, whatever your desire is, and then get together in like the family room and just take turns reading it to each other. It's pretty dense with rhymes, and so some of the cadences can be a little challenging and really fun. It's almost like Fox and Sox like in that way. So the more you read it, the more you kind of get the rhythm to it. But I kind of imagine people reading it together and kind of having a laugh and asking each other questions.
And what made you personally write this book?
Well, I have my own children, and so I investigated the vaccine topic because I knew that would be coming up. And even my wife is an immigrant, and in applying for her green card, they wanted her to get the flu shot and the Tdap, and she was actually pregnant at the time. And I was like, that doesn't seem like a good idea. And the more I researched it, the more it wasn't. And then, of course, they impelled us to get at least the Tdap just so she can get a green card. So that was kind of the first foray into the medical mandate thing. Then once we had our kids, everything was vaccine mandates. And so I just started to do my own research. And then, of course, COVID came, and it was just more mandates for work. And kind of a vaccine craze. And the more I looked at the topic, I just felt that someone needed a way to communicate this very complicated information in a way that was approachable for a more mainstream audience.
You've approached it as serious with rhyme, humor in a children book format, but I just saw the first line, children lined up with trust in their eyes, and that's the crux of the matter. These little children are voiceless. They don't know what's about to happen. They trust the doctor, they trust the parent. And so
yeah, that last segment you had with Theresa was kind of heartbreaking. You know, this, you know, that think about kids taken away from their families and they're in school and they trust the teachers and they are supposed to trust doctors, and then to be kind of have that Gardasil vaccine foisted upon them, which is, I mean, if you actually do the math on it, again, I'm not a mathematician, but I looked pretty carefully at the math, and the numbers I came up with was the amount of people that could possibly die from cervical cancer is way less than the amount of people that could be seriously injured by the Gardasil vaccine. And that's just from the publicly available data.
So is this book kind of centered around sort of school-age children?
Yeah, so basically I start with measles as a concept, that it is a vaccine, should be taken seriously, but historically humans have gotten through it. We know how to treat it. There's a benefit to having it in the long run. But this bureaucrat named Enko comes along, and she decides that, you know, parents are missing work. There's a cost to this, and so we need to create this product, this vaccine. And so she gets a company called, what I'm calling Smirk is the name of the company that develops the vaccine, and they develop a vaccine, and then to sell the vaccine, because it ended up having side effects, she went to the government and pushed for mandates. And also the liability protection. So really, it's based on a very true story of the 1986 National Childhood Immunization Act, and I just tried to kind of cover all that ground of, you know, the development of those initial vaccines, the MMR, the Tdap, polio vaccines, and then you know, giving the immunization to the manufacturers, and then foisting those upon school-age children just to attend school. So it dovetails actually quite well with Theresa's segment.
Yeah. And no, as a father, are you afraid of measles and mumps and rubella? In my day, they were just mild childhood illnesses, but does it frighten you?
I mean, I think I'd be lying if I didn't say I wasn't afraid of my kid getting sick. Nobody wants their kid to be sick. But at the same time, I'm more afraid of having a child with a lifetime of a chronic illness like autism, allergies, atopy, eczema. There's all these things that, you know, frankly, I think it's a trade-off. You know, I think we've traded off an acute infectious disease for chronic disease. And again, not everyone has these outcomes, but no one's looking into it because it's become a verboten topic. We're not allowed to even we're not allowed to even ask the question, you know, who might be more vulnerable to vaccine injury. And if we were allowed to ask that question, maybe we could identify which patient population is safe to give these things to, and it's not. But frankly, I think that, yeah, I mean, we know a lot more about measles and these other diseases, and they're ultimately very treatable. Most of them are diseases from an older age of malnutrition and unsanitary living conditions, and we've conquered most of that stuff. The greatest gains to public health have been through sanitation, plumbing, and general nutrition. And we've conquered all these things. So now, like measles and all these things, it's like we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't currently exist, and we're using very old technology to do it.
Yeah, and one thing that no one really talks about, which is the glaring obvious thing, which is the unvaccinated are so healthy compared to the vaccinated. I mean, we've filmed so many unvaccinated families. We've seen the studies that have obviously been retracted. And it's for parents like myself with a vaccinated child, it's a kick in the gut that we were so blind following the system. So your book is very, very important to be educating the young as well to the dangers of vaccine.
Yeah, I mean, I sincerely hope that eventually, as America comes around and the world comes around on this topic, the book kind of becomes part of the health curriculum in schools, because it's ultimately a very approachable work. The rhymes are fun, and I think something about rhyming. I don't know. It's just I'm really like rhyming. I think it's like, songs rhyme, and there's some sort of weird resonance people have when something rhymes well, and it's kind of satisfying. Yeah, it's I kind of try to boil down a very complicated topic into a pretty simple and really fun book in a kind of Seussian style. So I really hope that the book is able to get this kind of information out to a much broader audience that maybe reading books like actually I have a list of further readings in the back of the book, but like some of those books might be challenging for people.
Have you experienced being attacked? Have you experienced censorship? Because I think you're going to get it.
Well, I mean, I'm using the pseudonym, obviously, Gnome Inkfeather, because I work for a couple institutions that probably would not be thrilled about my stance on this. And so we'll kind of see, really. I mean, this is the first time I'm showing my face thus far. It's only been my logo there. But we'll see how dedicated they really are to diversity, because the diversity of opinion is really what matters. And I have been somewhat, my opinions and views and voice have been blocked already during the COVID pandemic. And I wrote about that for Heather Hying. She had a Substack where she invited people to write COVID era stories, and I wrote that story there. So if people want more information about that, they can find that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been attacked and censored for years, but they're often just bots behind computer screens, so just goes over your head. But you're very brave, and we really appreciate what you're doing. So what kind of conversation do you think a family would be having after they read that book as a family?
Well, again, I'm not trying to put my opinions into anyone's heads or mouths. I'm trying to get people to ask questions and to be more just be more aware and have more agency with what they're doing and the choices they're making. The book starts out with the quote that's been attributed to Dr. Benjamin Rush, and to paraphrase it, it's basically say that the Constitution should have an amendment to enshrine medical freedom. Otherwise, the practice of medicine will be taken over by a class of men that will basically use it to run it as an authoritarian kind of dictatorship. And that's where we've landed now. I think that anytime the government gives any sector of the economy any sort of immunity to liability, they, in the long run, will gain the power to fully take over the government. And I think currently we're living in a medical autocracy.
Yeah, and it takes people like you and a great many more to stand up, be brave, speak out, and we truly appreciate it. How can we get this book?
It's going to be it's on Amazon, of course. Target is going to be carrying it. I think Walmart, all the major retailers will have it. I don't think you're going to see it on any shelves. I think it's going to be mostly online. But yeah, and you can find it there. We're producing it for Kindle, and an audiobook version as well. An Audible will be available, and it comes out November 17th.
So interesting. You got into Target, Walmart. Put the front cover up again, please, Lou. I just wonder if they think that you're pro-vax, you're the other way. Look, Liz.
I'm quite happy with the title that I actually originally self-published it with a different title, and the publisher kind of wanted me to shorten it up a bit, and I came up with this one. And yeah, I think this title is good because it does have a little bit of ambiguity in it. Like, it's almost like, oh, this is going to be a good, because what you'll see on a lot of shelves these days, and especially in the libraries, is a lot of propaganda in the guise of children's books. Propaganda for certain lifestyles, in my opinion, certain mental illnesses have been widely distributed now in the form of children's literature. And so all the better if they think that this is a pro-vaccine book that suits people's biases, and then they put on the shelf maybe without reading it, only to discover later that they're going to get more information than they bargained for.
Oh, right. It's like when we made Vax, the movie, everyone thought it was about pro-vaccine until they watched it. Well, listen, I think it's amazing what you've done, and we're truly grateful that you came on CHD TV this morning to talk to us about it. Let's put up your website one more time so people can go there, get more information. Noam Linkfeather.com.
Yeah, noinkfeather.com.
Okay, so thank you so much for being on this morning. Enjoy that beautiful day behind you, and we will so for sure be getting that book and educating the children. Really important. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone, we're going to go to Doctors and Scientists with Dr. Ben Tapper now. It's going to be a good show.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Doctors and Scientists. I'm your host, Dr. Brian Hooker. And our guest today is so absolutely amazing. I want to get right to him, bring him on. Dr. Ben Tapper, doctor of chiropractic out of Blair, Nebraska. Sounds like a lovely place. I need to come and visit. I think I met you online. We had like an online meeting right before the Disinformation Dozen came out. Dr. Ben Tapper, a part of the Disinformation Dozen, because you were spreading the truth in the COVID pandemic and way before that as well. Ben, welcome to the show.
Brian, thanks for having me. Always love connecting with you, my friend. You're definitely a brother from another mother, and just love you, my friend, and appreciate you and all the work you do, my friend.
Well, thank you so much. Let's start, for the small sliver of the world, especially in our circles, that may not know your story and the Disinformation Dozen and countering digital hate. Give us sort of the capsule view of that.
So basically, I was very outspoken. I would put on lectures for decades about vaccines, and I would talk about how the government's manipulating data in the National Vital Statistics System. Real nerdy. It's probably why I didn't have a girlfriend for a long time. But, thank God now I'm married. I have 5 children. But, it's I would talk about how, there's a lot of corruption around this topic. And, in 2020, I spoke out passionately about, the pandemic and COVID and trying to raise awareness on these vaccines. I prayed, Lord, let my words travel far and wide. And he answered that prayer in a big way. And that video went viral. And 2 months after that video going viral, I was labeled by the CCDH, which is the Center for Countering Digital Hate. They labeled me, Bobby Kennedy, Joe Mercola, Sherry Tempany, and a few others as part of this so-called Disinformation Dozen. There's actually 13 of us on the list. That's government math for you. They said that we were responsible for 65% of the misinformation on vaccines. And I said, dang it, I was shooting for 100%. But yeah, they were trying to, isolate us and say that there's only 12 of us, but actually we had a giant campaign going around and, more than 12. There was millions of us. And so that's kind of my story, in the history of it, but they completely deplatformed me, censored me, took my accounts down, and, they were afraid of the truth. And there's a saying out there, it's truth is treason in an empire of lies. And they were afraid of people like us not bending a knee. And, we were unafraid to speak truth to power during that time.
Absolutely. And you've done so many wonderful things. You've spoken out so bravely regarding, so many lies of the government. To me, the Disinformation Dozen really is the Hall of Fame. And I was kind of jelly because I didn't make it. I was like, oh my goodness. I wanted to, contact the Center for Countering Digital Hate and say, hey, you made a mistake. You left me off your dang list. Excuse me.
Right.
There was so much truth, and you present it so boldly. You're going to council meetings. You're going to other venues. You've testified and you spoke at different places and different platforms, and done crazy good things like having an invitation to salvation and water baptism where you've spoke. And for me, I mean, I'm a Christian. If you're not a Christian, that's wonderful. I think that you should become a Christian. But there's so much bravery in what you do, Dr. Tapper.
Well, I appreciate that. There's a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. He said that the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in times of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. You mentioned, being a Christian. I feel like that's where a lot of my conviction came from. During 2019, we had the Event 201, all this stuff coming. We had, in the vaccine summit of 2019, they put, they took out "In God We Trust." They put "In Vaccines We Trust."
Right.
And then in this whole thing, just the words like "corona" means crown, and just there's nothing you could do naturally to stop COVID-19. I'm like, well, what about prayer and hope?
Hmm.
Hope is the most powerful drug there is. And where are the Christians here speaking out? We need to be the light in the darkness here. And then there was a lot of people in the church is like, oh, thank God there's a vaccine coming. That's the savior here. And the Jesus statue, they put vaccine saves across the chest. And then in Fauci, "In Fauci we trust." I'm like, this is all blasphemous. Like, so
Right.
just the golden calf here of these vaccines. And it just became such a religion. And I would see this, and I had the convictions. And that's where a lot of this conviction came from. And I was taught that fear is the fire that fuels the furnace of disease. And when we are so fearful, especially in the health setting, you need to run. It's
Right.
just it should never be in a health setting. In fact, the Bible's very clear. Do not fear. Do not be afraid. We need to fear God, and not like, oh, he's a big bully or he's scary, but he is a just God. And
Right.
I do not want to be on his side of wrath, because that is scary. But God is the God of love. He loves us and he cares about us, and he doesn't want us to be fearful here. But we need to be wise when it comes to our health. We need to take care of the body, but we shouldn't fear disease like what we've seen during the pandemic.
That's absolutely, such truth. And there was so much fear going around. And so many things didn't make sense. I mean,
Yeah.
the things that we were told to do were counterintuitive. Number one, you can't really lock down healthy people in a pandemic. I mean, it made absolutely no sense whatsoever. And number two, you cannot vaccinate your way out of a pandemic, especially with a leaky vaccine, which this is the leakiest. And I dare call it a vaccine. It's not. It's a gene therapy,
Right.
and it foisted, so much carnage on society. Are you seeing individuals, I dare say, even within your practice, are you seeing folks with COVID vaccine injuries?
I get people reaching out to me all the time, Brian, just about that.
Really?
Just remotely. Yes, in my office, I would see that, but very little. Most of my patient base are unvaccinated.
Right.
But the amount of people reaching out to me on social media, telling me their stories, not only just with the vaccine injury, but just even with the protocols that were pushed in the hospital. Um, that's something that I think really, really needs to be investigated. And, this is where I hope Rand coming up with Fauci on trial here on the 29th. I really, really pray that Rand investigates and looks into and questions him on the protocols, especially with Fauci's history of the remdesivir and his knowledge of the remdesivir. That needs to be opened up. The
Right.
gain of function topic is very heavily um, covered by Rand, but
Right.
but he needs to look into the protocols.
I really, wanted to talk to you about this today. The hearings are July 29th, where Tony Fauci has been subpoenaed. He is not appearing by his own will. He's been compelled to come by law to answer these questions. And in fact, when he was invited, he did decline and was not going to show up. So it took a subpoena to get him there. Um, regarding regarding these protocols, talk to me about. I'm not exactly wanting you to climb into the head of Tony Fauci, but in some ways I am. I mean, he was not motivated really by anything in terms of science and medicine, because we know, and I'm hard pressed to think that he was unknowledgeable, but we know that what happened was counterintuitive. And really you could predict the outcome very, very easily, of those actions, and the outcome was not good.
Right. I mean, the thing, Brian, that really just fuels my fire, number one, people died because of what Fauci pushed on the people.
Right.
He knew full well what he was doing. This is why we call this like the pandemic, the agenda that was pushed here. And if you look prior to 2020 with the Ebola, outbreaks in the Congo and, the drugs that they used there, remdesivir was used and it was causing myocarditis in more than 50% of the people. And, there was a 53% mortality rate with this drug. He knew full
Hmm.
well it was killing people. And, the implementation, the timing of it all just is very suspicious. And, the death rate during COVID, was around the time of remdesivir being implemented with the ventilators. And it's just the incentives that were pushed in the hospitals when people died. I mean, that's all criminal. And
Oh, yeah.
it was from top-down authoritative doctors like Fauci. He knew full well that the drug of choice was causing harm and had a history of renal failure and myocarditis, and
Hmm.
and so it needs to be investigated. But not only that, the PCR testing, there was some manipulation on the PCR testing. These PCR tests were not calibrated. I know a guy here in town that owned a gun shop that's like, hey, I'm going to open up a PCR testing facility because it was hype. It was a very high profit business to be opening. But
Right.
these PCR tests were not calibrated. I had patients that were like, I'm asymptomatic, but I tested positive. What's that about? And there was a high false positive rate around these PCR testing, which is, again, these numbers go into a database and it inflated these numbers, and they use that to scare people and coerce people to getting these vaccines. But again, so that's just one of many, many violations that Fauci, really committed is a crime against humanity. And so I pray that this pardon that Biden, gave Fauci in the last hours of his presidential run here, I think that I don't know how much weight that pardon carries. It was an auto pin,
Right.
pardon, but I really do think that that Rand needs to hammer him on those protocols, because that's the number one thing I get, Brian, is people reaching out to me trying to blow the whistle on the protocols, because people died, people were affected by that more than I think maybe even the vaccine.
Well, I have to say, personally, I heard many stories of individuals that trusted the medical system at that point in time. And I don't fault them for doing that. I trusted the medical system with my son's infant vaccinations. I was wrong. But hearing the story of um, admission to hospital because of a low pulse ox, going into remdesivir therapy, people asking the hospital for alternative therapies like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, being denied because that wasn't the standard of care. That was sort of the magic fairy dust that was going to cure you. If I hear standard of care one more time, I'm going to spit up. But it is a cop out. It is absolutely wrong, and it's the wrong thing that you need to tell people that are sick. Standard of care then being remdesivir, lungs then filling up with fluid, being put in ICU on ventilators, and then ultimately dying, and with a $250,000 payout to that particular hospital. And that's sort of the dirty little secret that nobody wanted to know. Now, on top of that, the rollout of the thing that was supposed to save us, this quote unquote vaccine. I mean, you saw it coming in. You saw it coming in the rearview mirror.
Mm.
What were your thoughts around that? And as this this quote unquote vaccine was being distributed.
Right. So this there's a lot to unpack here.
Right.
So we first need to look into the DARPA contract with Pfizer.
Right.
That's they're pushing mRNA type technology with the spike protein, all these different things. Back in 2013, there was a contract signed between DARPA and Pfizer that needs to be opened up. And this mRNA technology was pushed with such a how do I say it? military type precision and planning.
Right.
They had, there was a document that was put out by Yale early on in the pandemic, and it was kind of leaked. It was a leaked document from Yale talking about how to coerce the American people into getting this vaccine. And one, they talked about pulling the heartstrings, like the emotional components, to use to manipulate people into getting it and taking action. One was like, oh, it's for grandma. One was for like this is your patriotic duty. And Fauci was using that basically in every regard to push that on the people. It was like, roll up your sleeve, don't ask questions, don't do your own research, trust the science. The science is settled, it's safe and effective. All these bumper sticker slogans were very manipulative, and you were persecuted if you were trying to do your own research. You were persecuted
Right.
for asking questions. There's a quote by Mark Twain said, anytime you're going with the majority, that's the time to pause and reflect. The Bible is very clear: do not conform to this world. That alone, we should be, as Christians, should be on high alert anytime the majority is just running to do something, instead of just questioning and sitting back. But it was a difficult time, and just talking about it, it's like, there's still a lot of work to do here, because the medical establishment, there's a huge part of the medical establishment that really just still has all this faith in vaccines and this mRNA, and they're going to make no mistake, all these vaccines are heading towards that mRNA type of technology, and it needs to be talked about. We need to hit the brakes on it, because you're going to have more problems than ever before. What did we see with this mRNA technology? We saw more myocarditis than ever before in healthy populations. I mean, you look at the men, I think it was age 12 to 25 had the highest amount of myocarditis, and that's not normal.
No.
They're trying to normalize that, and that's absolutely, a massive red flag, because a physician would see a myocarditis case maybe in a 30-year span once or twice, and prior to the mRNA technology, but now we're seeing on a regular, and it's really criminal.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I want to emphasize is that if you were wrong regarding COVID, if you were wrong regarding the quote unquote vaccine, it's really okay to be wrong. I mean, I think there are a lot of people that cling on to, sort of this paradigm for their own reputation's sake. I mean, and it's all dust really at the foot of the cross. It really is. My reputation, Dr. Tapper's reputation, whatever, it's absolutely nothing. It's absolutely dirt. And I think as a scientist, I need to be ready to turn on a dime. If I'm wrong, I'll tell people I'm wrong. If I was wrong and was wrong historically, I will tell people that I was wrong. And people don't have that worldview of repentance is turning around 180 degrees, and then you keep on walking in that repenting direction.
Amen.
I wish more people, we have world leaders, religious leaders. I think of Franklin Graham getting the vaccine, pushing the vaccine, and I'm not calling him out because I think he's a bad person, but pushing the vaccine, then having pericarditis, having to have his pericardium removed. I believe it was emergency surgery. I'm not correct, but those people were wrong.
Yep.
And I think that the path of salvation is admitting that, moving forward, and looking at saving as many people as possible.
Amen. There's a quote out there. I think it's by Mark Twain again. I'm broken record with the Mark Twain quotes, but he said, it's not what we don't know that gets us in trouble. It's what we believe to be true that just ain't so. And I think there's a saying out there too. The highest form of knowledge is being able to admit that you're wrong and to keep learning. That's a form of integrity and knowledge, is to be able to realize and look at the data and unlearn what you've learned. And I have a good friend of mine. I went to church with him, and I really, really liked him. I still like him a lot, but he came out of med school so arrogant, and just, with this mindset of, oh, I'm right. You must, I have the white coat. You need to listen to me because I'm the doctor. I know everything. And he's praising these vaccines. And there's
Right.
just no thought of that these vaccines are wrong. But it's like, and I sent him the Stanley Plotkin deposition. I said, please, you admit that you're a Christian. Watch this deposition. Look at this and look at the information being presented here. Can we look outside of what you've been taught and look at the information presented? And do you have the capability of changing your mind and turning away from what you've learned? And the word repentance, is turning away from, but turning towards God. And I feel like, seek the truth and the truth will set you free. There is a stronghold being pushed. And that's why I think this whole thing is spiritual. There's such a spiritual stronghold around the stigma of vaccines and this information being presented. And
Right.
this, it's like the truth is being suppressed. And censorship is a real thing. And it's occurring in our healthcare field. And that it's all evil, Brian. And as you know.
Yeah, yeah. We're experiencing it right now. I have a paper that I co-authored with Neil Miller that is on the bubble. The journal itself is admitting and actually publicizing that it's being reviewed for retraction. Neil himself, Neil Miller, a great medical journalist, analyst, published a paper in Toxicology Reports, I believe in 2019, it was removed. Because it needed to be censored and it had to deal with, the timing of vaccines and sudden infant death syndrome. Because it had to be censored, the journal came up with a new category to take down papers. It was removed and not retracted. So, something insidious is going on. It really, really is, thicker than thick. And because of what you experienced with censorship, with deplatforming, I think, well, you're one of the perfect people to speak to this in this point in time. I mean, they did not want your word to get out, not because it was false, but because it was true, and the truth is powerful.
Amen. It is. Censorship is only used by evil people when the lie loses its power. And so censorship is a tool of the tyrant. And so and George Martin stated, when you cut out a man's tongue, you don't prove him a liar, but you are fearful of what he has to say. And so, yes, I've been deplatformed. My Google folders have been wiped out. My social media at one time was, during the early days of the pandemic, we were reaching 3 to 4 million people a month, and then I was deleted. I was deleted 6 times on Instagram, permanently banned on YouTube, PayPal, Venmo seized my accounts. And so
Wow.
it's and so they're afraid of the truth tellers. They're afraid of the
Mhm.
people unwilling to bend a knee to tyranny. And
So the
so
saga continues. I mean, if I can interrupt, I didn't realize that this continued on. I mean, you're on X,
I'm on X.
but you've never been restored by Meta, is that correct?
I've been restored by not by Meta. No, I'm
No,
sorry.
okay,
No,
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 Facebook or Instagram. So you're no
no.
longer, yeah,
Yeah, all
yeah,
those
okay,
accounts they're long gone.
okay,
It makes me want to run for office because they deleted Bobby Kennedy. They legally had to give his account back, and it makes me want to do that same thing. Like, what if I ran for office and I could sue them and get my accounts back? But it's like I've had so many accounts now. It's like, which one do I want to get back? I'm like, can you just combine them all into one?
right,
But you know,
right.
but it is in X, I feel like they gave my account back, but I got hacked here earlier this year, and they were posting almost, I think, 2,000 posts a day. So a lot of people muted my account.
Right.
So my reach on X got really hindered here recently, but thank God I got the account back. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's comical, Brian, because some people a lot in the scientific field, they don't even admit that censorship is occurring. And I literally laugh. I laugh from the belly. I'm like, really?
mhm.
But it is occurring. And why do they have to censor it? If these vaccines are so effective and safe, why are they censoring our voices?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's one thing I want you to expound on that I think that our viewers and listeners and everybody needs to hear. One of the things that you've done is that you have realigned, retooled, and rethought things to actually in sort of this public forum or and even your occupation, you've aspired to do less.
Hmm.
I love that. And it's not because you're just aspiring to do less so you can loaf around and and watch game shows all day. You've realigned your focus. I have to tell, and then I'll shut up, but I have to tell this. I was out on your chiropractic website and I was looking at your office hours and I'm like, I love that. I absolutely love that. In the office, 4 days a week, working mostly afternoons and working appointments. Why did you scale back?
Well, I that's a great question. So I had a clinic that was doing very well during all the way to the pandemic, and when I got labeled one of the disinformation dozen, I was working, very hard trying to bring truth to the people. I still
Right.
am, but I made a promise to my children that I'd spend more time with them. I moved out into the country and I'm with my 5 children, and I know that time is our greatest asset. I used to preach that health is our greatest asset. Health is the currency that buys the greatest asset, which is our time. And
Mhm.
uh, you know, I'm not making the money that I used to make at my other clinic, but I could make more money if I expanded my
Right.
hours. But to me, it's like, life is not what you gather, it's what you scatter. And
Right.
I want to spend as much time as I can with my children and create as many memories as I can and live life to the fullest because we're here for a very short time. And, I think it's Proverbs 11:28. I think that's the verse that's like, those who seek put their money in their riches will fall, but those who seek the Lord will be a flourishing tree. And that's my goal. That's my main mission in life now. And, it's one of those things where I, time is my main priority.
Right. Right. And, there's so many accolades in society by doing more,
Mm,
by being more exposed, by having a greater reach. Very, very few times you hear about the people who are like, no, you know what? I'm going to focus on my family. I am going to focus on that is everlasting. And I love the way that you put time. The moments that are created with your family aren't by getting everything right. It's just by putting the time in. So the situations can become right. And my own son, I only have one child, but my own son, he remembers that all the time that we spent together, not just the special going to Disney or SeaWorld or whatever.
right. And that's the thing. It's being intentional with your time and, creating those memories. That's what we look back on. That's all we have,
Yeah.
and I think being present too. I think right now the world is so busy. We're so full of distractions, and just being present time consciousness is a real thing. And being present and intentional with our time, with our children, with our loved ones is so important. But yeah, creating those memories right now, that's what it's all about. We just got back from camping in Niobrara this week, and it was very last minute impromptu. I told my staff, I'm like, I don't think I should be going, but I'm like, I got so much stuff to do, but I'm like, I'm just gonna go. You know what? I'm gonna
Yeah.
make it make this a priority and just and be intentional. And it's like, oh, I don't have the time. None of us do, but
No.
it's like make the time, and that's where we are with being intentional.
I appreciate that so much. The first time I met you in person, you were with your son
Yeah.
at the Defeat the Mandates rally in LA.
Mhm.
And I think it was a reception beforehand. And I was so, I was thankful and encouraged and impressed that, you had this young man with me, very, very polite, very, very congenial young man, and that I got to see inside the Tapper family. And not only did I meet Dr. Ben Tapper, but I got to see inside your family, which is such a testimony of you.
Well, that means the world to me, Brian. Yeah, and we had the whole crew there, and yeah, it was. I think I don't know if I got the memo, but we were the only ones there with kids, and but it was fun.
Well, it was the right thing. It was, yeah, yeah. I'll speak for everybody, all the sponsorship and everything. That was the absolute wonderful right thing to do. And so, Ben, thank you so much. Where can people get more information about you, about what you're doing, about your clinic? and about what you've endured.
We are from a 30,000 square foot view, we are in legal battles. Thanks to the Children's Health Defense. We are suing the Trust News Initiative. And that lawsuit is still ongoing. We are against we're suing the CCDH with Jeff Childers is representing us. And so that's a big lawsuit right now. So just be praying for that. You can find me on social media. Just type in Dr. Ben Tapper on Instagram, on Substack, Facebook, and all the socials. You can go to drbentapper.com and get yourself a Disinformation Dozen Honorary Member t-shirt. And you can support us on our podcast, Dr. Ben Tapper's podcast.
I want that shirt, man. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Wow. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
That is so exciting. Well, thanks again, Dr. Ben Tapper. So many words of wisdom, and so encouraging, always so encouraging to see you. And thanks everybody. Share. This is an important episode of Doctors and Scientists. I think I say that a lot. I always mean it, but I especially mean it. And make sure that you tune in, let people know about it so they can hear about Dr. Ben Tapper's experience, what he's living through, what he's lived through, and how God's carried him through it.
Amen. Thank you, Brian.
Okay, so first of all, tell us who you are.
I'm Amanda Hitchcock.
How many children have you got?
I have 3. I have twins that are 5 years old, and I have a 6-year-old daughter. Before them, I had a son in 2007 called Alfie, my first, and I had him vaccinated. I didn't know any different. And and I can remember at the time not feeling that comfortable about doing it, to the point where I sent my mother-in-law to get him injected because I couldn't bear it. And didn't really question anything, but because I think I've grown up being told that that vaccines are very important. And so, we had him vaccinated, and the doctor said to my mother-in-law that within, he'll probably start to feel a bit poorly on the 10-day mark, which is when the live part of the vaccine comes into play. And on day 10 exactly, I was at work, and my partner was a stay-at-home father, and he called me during the day to say he wasn't very well, he wasn't eating, wasn't drinking, so I just said, look, did all the normal things, call the doctor, get him down there, get him checked out. Doctor was not interested at all, just said give him some Calpol and put him to bed. And if he's like it tomorrow, bring him down. So I got home, his temperature was probably about 39. I administered some Calpol to him, and it went down about 0.5 degree, and he was very, very tired, so I put him to bed. We had some tea. I went up to check on him about half an hour, 45 minutes later, and he was dead. I tried to bring him round, and I administered CPR, and but I knew, even though I was doing it, that he was gone. There was no bringing him back. I sort of immediately put 2 and 2 together, because it was day 10, and I don't know, we were treated quite badly actually, because obviously the paramedics turned up and they took us to the hospital, and they were still working on him in the ambulance, and then when we got to the hospital they put us in a room, and then about 15 minutes later they come in and said, well, so sorry, he hasn't made it.
How old was he?
He was 14 months old.
14 months?
Yeah, he was 14 months, yeah. And I just said to the doctors, it was that vaccine, wasn't it? And the look in their eye said everything. They didn't even have...
What vaccine was it?
MMR.
Just the MMR?
Yeah, just the MMR.
So MMR killed your kid?
Yes.
14 months?
Yeah, 14 months old, yeah.
Describe him before he died, if you can bear it.
Sorry?
Describe his character. What
Lovely. It was just, I mean, obviously I'm very biased, but yeah, he was a very happy child, and rarely had any trouble with him. He was never really ill. He'd only been to the doctors once in them 14 months. For a medical reason, because where he was so chunky, he had a big double chin, and where the milk used to dribble down, he got quite sore around his neck. So we had to go and get some cream for that. He'd been to the doctor. I obviously had him vaccinated as per the schedule with all the others, but he had rarely been ill. Actually, he was just a very healthy child and very chunky. He was breastfed for the first 4 months of his life, and that all went absolutely fine. So yeah, it was a bit of a shock. Well, I say a bit of a shock. Obviously, it completely and utterly destroyed us. And then I can remember when he had the MMR, those 10 days, leading up to them 10 days. He got really angry, and I have photographs of him where he's just so frustrated, and you can see it was, and I couldn't quite understand why. He was sort of off his food, but yeah, it was these tempers that I'd never experienced with him, and I now know that he was probably suffering.
Yes.
And we just didn't know anything about it.
What did the doctor say when you said it's that vaccine?
Well, we can't comment. Obviously there'll be an autopsy. We'll get back to you. So we had to get a taxi home because obviously we'd travelled in the ambulance and I was in the paramedics' car. We were just left to go home. And then when we got home, we were met by 2 police officers who basically wanted to take stuff out of his room. They drilled us about what he'd eaten, had we done anything different. They took his pillow, they took his quilt, they took his teddy bear. We were, for about 2 hours, we sat in our living room while they were upstairs in our son's room. I felt like I'd done something wrong. It was really, really traumatic, really traumatic. I was really keen to find out, obviously, so I drove the coroner mad by phoning them every day. And on the 3rd day after he'd passed, I had a conversation with, I think it was the coroner's secretary, and she was like, look, Miss Hitchcock, she said, yes, I think we have found something. She said, we found that he had a very enlarged heart. So we think that it may have been an undiagnosed heart issue. So I said, okay. And at that point I felt a little bit relieved because I obviously agreed to have him vaccinated. And if it wasn't the vaccine, then I had no part to play in it. So for a moment, I felt quite relieved in a way. And then they issued the autopsy report, and the paediatrician came to my house to explain all the terminology that was in it. And his heart was perfectly normal. So I don't even know where she got that information from. There was nothing wrong with any of his organs. They said that he had a systematic response to the vaccine, which they considered normal. So I said, well, how do you know? How many dead babies have you done an autopsy on for you to conclude that it was normal? And they just ignored me, completely shut me down. I didn't even, they said they were going to hold an inquest because I was contesting the fact that they had actually put it down to sudden infant death. And that's what they classified his death as. And they held a meeting, but they wouldn't tell me when or where. And then all I got was a letter in the post with just to say that his death has been classified as a sudden infant death.
It's not the first time that we've heard about this enlarged heart as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, too many times that is being used as your baby had an enlarged heart. Bullshit.
That's really interesting. Really
so that's
interesting.
That first line.
Yeah.
And it's so cruel.
Yeah, it is. It is. So I still have no justice for him because nobody stood up and said yes, it was the vaccine. Nobody. And I can remember the first time I sat there in my living room and I just Googled MMR deaths, and I burst into tears because I had no idea. That there were deaths that happen as a result of being vaccinated. I wasn't aware that there were so many side effects, possible side effects from being vaccinated. You're told that it's safe, and that you're doing it to help prevent all these really dangerous diseases and viruses. But obviously since then I've left no stone unturned, really. I've looked at so many reports and I've studied and I've met with so many other people, really brave people. And it's really only over the last sort of 4 years that it's becoming a little bit more wider known. It's, people are beginning to question, which is all I ever ask, really, because I didn't question, and I wish I did. Yeah. It's
very painful.
Yeah, really painful. And I think, people, it's instilled in you all throughout school, and it's all the norm. And even when we had our second child, Maisie, even my partner, he was like, well, do you think we should be vaccinating? He was still concerned about not vaccinating. We spent many hours mulling it over and me showing him the stuff that I'd found. He obviously eventually came around to my way of thinking.
So your next two children are unvaccinated?
Yeah, so I had Maisie, and she's unvaccinated, and then I had twins. I had a boy and a girl. So,
and they're unvaccinated?
And they're unvaccinated.
And how are they?
Perfect. Rarely ill, might get the odd cold and the odd sniffle. And considering actually that Marley and Layla were seven weeks premature, they are the fittest and the healthiest that that I could ever imagine, and in fact I think it taught me a lot, actually, because I dealt with them, I parented them differently. I wasn't that quick to administer pharmaceutical drugs or go to the doctors. Marley and Layla. Oh, Layla's had one set of antibiotics in her 5 years for a urine infection, but other than that, we treat everything holistically. Everything.
This is such a sad story that you vaccinate a child and the vaccine kills your child.
And nobody admits that it was the vaccine. It was just a freak of nature.
These people on Periscope know it's the vaccine.
Mm.
We know it's the vaccine.
Oh, yes.
I think now that this is the problem, we're done with these people.
Yes.
And their lives. Did you get any kickback for not vaccinating your other children from anyone?
I started to receive letters from the doctor's surgery when Maisie was born to say that she is due her routine vaccinations. And I wrote a letter and said no, she would never be getting vaccinated. And then they sent me quite a strong letter. So I went down to the surgery on vaccination morning and I became very vocal and said, if you send me one more letter of you trying to kill my further children with a vaccination, I said, I will come down here every vaccination morning and I will start screaming at my story.
Were there people in the waiting room?
Yes, yeah, there was, yeah. And funnily enough, I never received any more letters. I recently received a letter after a school, they do school health checks, and I got a letter to say that the records show that Marley and Layla hadn't been vaccinated, so I stuck it in the bin. Yeah, it doesn't even warrant a response from me anymore. So, yes.
One thing I want your opinion on with because my son was injured from the MMR.
I know.
But thank God, I haven't. That's why I'm so sorry for you.
Thank you.
But they want to, in America, a lot of the doctors on our side as well, they say it's too many too soon. They want to withdraw the vaccine schedule so it's like it used to be. But like it used to be, our children just had the MMR on that day. I don't think there's any safe and effective. But I know it, I see it out there. And it worries me extremely that they're calling for this reduced vaccine schedule. What do you think?
Absolutely not. I don't think there is a vaccine that is safe. I think that you just have to take a look at the non-existent studies, really. I think after researching every single vaccine, I haven't found one that hasn't got any toxic neurological damaging ingredients in it. I went to see Man-Made Epidemic, and I was very interested in that film actually. They'd set up a lab to try and manufacture vaccines without any toxic chemicals in it, and that's something that I'm very interested in. I don't know if it ever could be done.
But would you ever trust it?
No, never. No, personally, no.
That's the thing, it's trust.
It is the trust. The trust has gone completely. And especially, obviously, after seeing this movie, and I can remember Dr. Andrew Wakefield on that day of his court case, because I was asked to appear on Sky News and Channel 5 News, and they'd set it all up. I'd done video camera interviews with them, and then they said they'd bring a car to come and get me. Because of the outcome, they never contacted me again. I didn't even get a call. So it was interesting to see how the media manipulated that whole time. I couldn't get in touch with the journalists who'd been in touch with me and were all over me like a rash at the time. So no, the trust is gone. I don't trust anybody. I don't trust government. I don't trust pharmaceuticals. I don't CDC, absolutely never. I can't even take a paracetamol. I have problems with any kind of pharmaceutical drug. To the point where sometimes I really suffer, even just with a headache. But I drink a pint of water and I go to bed. I have terrible trouble trusting. I recently, last October, had some back surgery, which was quite funny because I'd been in so much pain for a whole year, and I'd gone under general anaesthetic, and when I'd come round, the pain had gone that I'd been living with for a whole year, and they were like trying to keep topping up with these painkillers, and I was like, no, I was a complete warrior, and they could not believe it. They were just like, oh my God, you must be in so much pain. I went, yeah, but it's nothing. And I said, and I don't want to mask that pain because I know I want to feel how it gets better naturally. It was. I'm terrible. I don't trust anybody.
Yeah, you're not terrible. It's exactly
right.
They killed your child.
Yeah. Yes, they did.
And Manu, you're going to get a picture of Alfie.
Yeah.
And we'll put him on the bus.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you so much for telling the story.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.